Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here with all of you in Jerusalem talking about the future. And most of this conference has been about paradigm shifts within different sectors. I'd like to talk to you in the few minutes I have today about a paradigm shift which is about to change the world. And it starts with the fact that we all know, each and every one of us sitting here today, that the world cannot continue to function in the way that it is doing. Social issues proliferate instead of shrinking. Inequalities in income and wealth are creating social tensions in different countries across the whole globe. And governments are throwing their hands up at the scale of the challenge. For one thing, they're aware that they are not necessarily the best place in which innovation springs. The risk of failure goes with innovation. And governments are not very good at accepting failure, even momentary failure. And philanthropists spend 5% of what governments spend on a yearly basis, $500 to $600 billion a year. That can't bring a solution either. And so we are living through an evolution in thought, but a revolution in means, which I call the impact revolution. Like the tech revolution before it, it's going to be driven by you, by the millennials. It's going to be supported by investors in the same way that venture capital came in. I came into the venture capital industry when I was 26, when it was just starting out. Came in as a response to the needs of business entrepreneurs, startup entrepreneurs. Before then, nobody had spoken of 10-year funds, illiquid investment, and not getting a running yield on an investment. And in a similar way, impact investment is the response to the needs of social entrepreneurs. And a social entrepreneur is being defined in a completely different way today. A social entrepreneur is not a person who just wants to work through a not-for-profit to improve lives. A social entrepreneur is also a person that creates profit with purpose business, whose goal is to deliver above market rates of return, but to deliver at the same time an improvement in people's lives or in the state of the planet. And I want to just spend a couple of moments explaining to you how I became aware of this revolution. In 2000, when I was still running Apax, I got a phone call from the British Treasury. Would I look with a task force at the issue of poverty? Because however much money the British government threw at poverty, it somehow didn't seem to make a dent in it. And when I began with the task force to look at it, I began to realize that our system, our capitalist system, you might say, had been very creative in finding ways to bring the capital markets to support those who want to make money. But it had never really concerned itself to try to connect the capital markets to those who want to improve lives or the planet. And so I began a search for a way of doing that, of connecting social entrepreneurs and the capital markets. And on the way to doing that, I created a number of organizations, one of which is called Social Finance. And I recruited 18 people in London, in the basement of my office in Portland Place. In the UK, startups don't start in garages, they start in basements. And after 3 years of work, two of the young people in that room came up to my office and said, "We've been working on the issue of young prisoners going back to prison. More than 60% across the world of young prisoners go back to jail within 18 months, here in Israel too. What do you think if we connect a reduction in the number going back to prison to a financial return on a security?" And that's how the social impact bond was born. That first bond, the Peterborough bond, delivered 3.1% return to investors for a 9.7% reduction in the number of convictions. It's a new way of talking. But more importantly, it's a very powerful new concept, which I discovered when the British government again asked me to chair a task force of the G8 countries, the largest industrialized countries of the world. And I created with my colleagues in each country a group of 10 to 20 people, and we began to analyze what was happening in terms of social issues across the world. And we discovered the shift in paradigm. The shift in paradigm was that millennials wanted more meaning than just making money. In the same way that they brought us the tech revolution through new ways of thinking, they were saying this is not the world we want to inherit. We want to bring innovation to the way in which our system improves lives. And at the same time, investors were saying the same thing. The United Nations Principles of Responsible Investment, which basically say when you make an investment decision, you expect to make more than just money. You expect an improvement in people's lives or an improvement in the environment. At that time, $40 trillion of investment assets had signed up for the UN PRI. What's the figure today? 70 trillion. And so you had millennials and you had investors pushing us to a new paradigm. And the change of paradigm is this. In the 19th century and before, when business and investment decisions were being made, it was all about financial return. In the 20th century, we brought in risk and return. It opened up new vistas in the sense that we began to think of holding venture capital investments or investments in startups or in private equity, in portfolios, even though they were illiquid, because their contribution through portfolio diversification was greater than the increase in risk. And the shift from return to risk and return was now taking us to the optimization of risk, return, and impact. And now you've heard these three dimensions, you'll see them increasingly spoken about. Just a few days ago, Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, biggest manager of assets in the world, 6.3 trillion, sent out a letter to his companies saying that he expects their CEOs to deliver more than just a profit, to deliver impact. If you look at legislation, in many countries, in the UK, the Social Values Act, the Modern Slavery Act, which basically says a company is responsible for the lives of people in its supply chain. In the United States, changes in regulation from the Treasury and from the Labor Department. The trustees of pension funds and charitable endowments have to take into consideration more than just financial returns in making investment decisions. And even here in Israel, the regulator of the pension fund industry sent out a note to pension funds across the country just a month or two ago, saying that they have to do something similar. They have to take into account the impact they are creating and report on it. So that is a trend. I believe the impact revolution will mark the 21st century in the way that the tech revolution did. And for those of you who are entrepreneurs, which is most of you, it means creating a new type of business, a business like Tesla, or Warby Parker, or Tom's Shoes, or Orcam here in Israel, a business that enables the blind or the visually impaired to put on a pair of spectacles that reads the road sign or the banknote in your hand or the goods on the supermarket shelf. Business models that integrate impact, that achieve measurable impact at the same time as they deliver a financial return. And I see evidence of impact entrepreneurship and impact venture capital and impact private equity and impact real estate, impact infrastructure. I see that coming from every direction now. And if I were 26 and coming into the venture industry today, I would be an impact venture investor, because that's where the investor money is going to flow, and that's where the talent is going to flow, and that's where the opportunities are going to flow. Now, it has been thought for a long time that there has to be a trade-off between making money and doing good. The slogan of the impact revolution is do good, do well. You can do both at the same time. By tapping into latent demand at a lower price point, you can achieve growth rates that are greater than those in the mainstream economy. There are all sorts of business models being created to take poor families out of debt, to reduce the amount of books that go into landfill, to reduce pollution in the center of cities, to improve water usage. And so my prediction is that the paradigm is shifting in a major way, and that just 1 or 2 decades from now, just making money is going to be a dirty word. For Israel, it creates the opportunity to bring its social values of tikkun olam, its innovation and its entrepreneurship, to add to its crown of startup nation, impact nation. Thank you.